Greetings and welcome back, everyone. This is Into the Nexus, the podcast all about Heroes of the Storm. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, here as always with Kyle Fergusson, and it's going to be a good show. It's a special show today. We have a new developer. Well, for the show, not for the game of Heroes of the Storm, but the first time joining us on this podcast, we like to call ITN, all the way from the Heroes of the Storm development team. Please welcome everybody. You know him as Blizz Kofalt. Some of you might know him as Rarjar, and we also may call him Josh multiple times during the show. All the same person.
Hi guys, I'm Josh Cofolt. I'm an associate game designer on Heroes of the Storm, and I primarily work on balance and the live environment.
Well, welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks for having
me. We are frequenters of the Heroes of the Storm subreddit, and so we've become very aware of your last name in the last few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on the Heroes team for about 6 months now as a developer, and so as I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with my job and the ins and outs, so I've been trying to spend more time on Reddit and really speaking out as often as I can.
Well, I know you said you've heard the show a few times. We've definitely been talking about what you've been saying quite a bit lately. So we've been really stoked on the kind of giving everyone a peek behind the curtain, how everything is going. And also, like, I feel pretty silly. I want to run this by you because a couple of weeks ago you made a post where you were like, I'm going to explain to you like when I get chatty. And like the TLDR on that was that you get chatty when things are pretty set in stone. You know what the patch is going to look like and it's coming down the pipe. And then like the next week a patch dropped and I was thinking to myself, this is so much sooner than I expected. And then I realized, well, Kofalt basically told us it was coming.
I mean, I definitely knew it was coming that next week. I wouldn't expect that, right? That's not going to be every time I comment, an immediate patch is going to drop. But I really like to speak on things when I know what's going to happen. As I kind of went in detail in the post, like, I don't want to be fluffy on Reddit. I want to really give as best information as I can. And I know that right before patch hits.
Well, thank you for doing it. I mean, it's been an awesome view into that world. We're very excited about balance around here. It's a very cool way to freshen up the game. It encourages all sorts of new strategy. Even simple changes can have these massive impacts, like Mal'Ganis all of a sudden being one of the top tanks because CC on the characters with CC gets reined in. But let's go back. Let's go back for a moment. How did you end up on the Heroes team, and where did that path kind of take you from?
Sure. So I have been playing Blizzard games pretty much my whole life. I have two older brothers, and we had a family computer, we had a TV, and we had the old computer. And the only thing the old computer could really run was Brood War. So I played a lot of Brood War growing up, just out of necessity, because that's the only thing that was open as the youngest brother. And that really led me to custom games in StarCraft, really led me to custom games in Warcraft 3, Dota, League of Legends, and then I get an invite to the Heroes Technical Alpha 7 years ago. Now I was looked it up. It's been 7 years I've been playing Heroes of the Storm. And so with that experience in Dota and League and that invite to the Technical Alpha, I was able to get quite good pretty early on and actually step my toe into the competitive scene. So that's my kind of like short history on C9, a little bit of history on complexity as a coach, and that kind of set me up to join the QA team on Heroes of the Storm almost 5 years ago now.
Okay, so that's where
kind of been my journey.
So you entered through QA. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heard that story more than once talking to Blizz devs.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on Heroes. Heroes had quite a lot of devs that came from the QA to designer pipeline. QA gives you this really cool perspective of every element of the game, right? You're talking to every discipline. You're talking to engineers, to art, to designers. So you get this like really cool perspective of how game development works, which kind of sets you up for success. Once you hop over, if you choose to.
Yeah, it's always interesting hearing those stories because, like, kind of back long, what feels like a long time ago for me, like when I was learning, like, there are people that make games. It's a big team. And when I first learned about like different divisions and QA, I don't know, I never thought of it that way, but it just makes all the sense in the world now. It's like it's a crash course in game design because I would assume you would need to know, as you mentioned, all of the different aspects of the way the game is put together to be an effective QA tester.
Yeah, Blizzard is pretty special in that they invest really heavily in their QA. And so we get like a lot of face time with our developers, and we're in a lot of those early meetings. So we get a lot of that extra juice, like we get to see that magic happen. And obviously we're providing feedback throughout the process. So again, that's, core part of that development is that iteration. And as QA, you're a huge role in that.
So that's kind of the missing piece there, the missing link. Because you go to maybe a normal company, and I see you guys, my imagining is like, you're sitting there on Illidan, you're trying to go through a wall all day. Eventually you go through a wall, and you send an email, and they're like, oh, geez, the grunts down in the basement really want our attention. We'll get to them eventually. But it sounds like it's something that's a little more, you walk up to them, you're involved.
Absolutely. It's much more of a relationship, which is huge.
That's rad. So what was it like, how did you eventually transition from QA to dev? Like, did you have to like fight AZ Jackson in 1v1 and if you beat him, you got the promotion?
Yeah, I actually had to beat him on Samuro. It was a very weird duel, but the whole, everyone watched, it was great. And, basically what ended up happening was this was something I wanted to do for a very long time, and I just made incremental progress towards it. We have these things that we call hackathons, which are basically opportunities for people to do work outside of their normal work to try to do, if you have a cool idea, just here's a week, make something, see what happens. And so for one of my previous hackathons, I implemented all the changes for a balance patch, right? So like I was familiar with a lot of the aspects of this role before I started working it, just through these hackathons and other opportunities.
Damn, that's so good. Some go-get-emness. That's awesome.
I mean, it also helps when you have people like Adam, which are they were very open and helpful the whole time. Like I absolutely view Adam as a mentor, and he helped me incredibly throughout my path. So I was blessed with opportunity and luck, and did the work.
Oh, you're also pretty damn good at the game. Don't sell yourself too short.
That helps. I mean, it's not a requirement, but it helps, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. For the dear listeners out there, Adam is AZ Jackson. We frequently forget to refer to him as his first name. Just a little.
I don't think he minds.
Little translation there. Well, so that's all right. So how long have you been in a development capacity on the Heroes team? Is that something you can share?
Yeah, since December of last year, I've been the designer on Heroes, working on Live and Balance.
That's okay. Right. So what would you say is your first big idea that you influenced or got in the game?
So I think the first big one would probably be Deckard's Lornados with the level 20 upgrade, getting the extra charge. And that same patch, I believe we have the Flamestark, the level 16 Kael'thas talent that gives you both the levels, all the level 7 talents. With the double
that was you. So,
that was me. Yeah.
You go back and listen. We were stoked about that one.
Yeah, that patch was basically me trying to make things that sound really exciting on paper, but aren't as broken as you think they are once you get into game. And so that was the main primary motivation, is to make make those patch notes pop. You'd be like, oh, I want to go into game right now and try that. Right. That was the desire there.
That's a pretty cool Will Hellscream. I like that a lot. So that began kind of this talent idea influence you had. Was the bacon kind of stitches now Murd and stuff all you as well?
No, absolutely not. So these larger reworks aren't going to be primarily me. I will be the final touches as those approach live. But the actual bacon, no, that was David Warner, who you would see on the Reddit quite a bit. And I think I was a voice in the room when we were talking about it, and I said yes, but the credit is not mine.
Okay.
Awesome. That's rad. That's really cool. Yeah, so it makes sense it would still be a team effort.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well, we've still got questions of our own. Kyle put up a Reddit thread this week that just went off. Shout out to the Heroes subreddit for just being very kind, and I was joking off stream earlier. I don't think I've ever seen a thread so perfectly on topic. Every comment, just wanted to pick your brain about stuff. So we're gonna start moving through those, and we're gonna try to get as many questions as we can, especially the ones that are on topic for what you do, Josh. Before we get into that, I do want to thank the folks that helped make Into Nexus possible. Obviously, the team making the game. Y'all are playing a big role in the fact that we still want to talk about the game. But we also have folks supporting us over at patreon.com/ITN. And everyone listening, if you like the show, you want to support Kyle and myself, that is the best way to do it. You get access to our Discord. You get to play games with us. We just did a game night last night. And to our most recent patron, we want to thank Jack Tilston. So thank you very much, Jack. We appreciate it. And now to get to the questions, there were some themes going on, and we tried to group the questions together to kind of move through these different themes. And we're going to start with we're going to keep getting to know you, because some folks just want to know like what you like to play in Heroes of the Storm. And one of those people was Warlock, who asked, who's your favorite hero aesthetically, and one that you just love to play?
That's a aesthetic. It's like considering aesthetic choices in your hero selection is a really interesting way to describe it, and I love this question. I think aesthetically, Ana to me, just the act of playing Ana throughout a game just feels so crisp. It's really hard to not pick her for that. But as far as fun to like, just someone I just purely love to play, it has to be Greymane. I'm a very greedy player, and Greymane lets me be greedy as often as I'd like, and it's a blast. So those have to be my two choices.
That's a pretty big divide between Ana and Greymane.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're aggressive, positioning forward for sleep darts, you can be greedy on Ana too. Trust me.
Okay.
I get the crispiness you're talking about with an Ana dart. Mostly, it just gives me anxiety because I'm bad on Ana. But
practice makes perfect.
That's rad. And then Iron Nick wanted to know, when you're playing HOTS, what's your personal favorite game mode? Where do you spend most of your time in the Nexus?
I think that's one that's a little harder to answer. It's like asking, my favorite child. It's I think at the moment it has to be ARAM. It's just this. I love brawling in Heroes. I think team fighting Heroes is just spectacular, and that you get that more per minute than any other game mode right now. So I'd have to say ARAM.
I'd love to hear that. We were having a laugh about it last night. When we were playing games with our listeners, because Kyle and I, that's not where we're naturally drawn. Where we wouldn't if you come to either of us, I don't think either of us would go, oh yeah, we're ARAM players. But we were having a laugh last night because we've started mixing it into our game nights about 3 months ago. And I was joking. I was like, man, I think another thing I really like about playing with our listeners is that we get a crash course on the ARAM meta, because we have a lot of listeners who love ARAM, and I've been liking it more and more. It gives me a weird Smash Brothers vibe that I wasn't expecting.
Oh yeah.
That I just enjoy. But
I'm happy to hear that, man. It's a lot of fun. Definitely like it's a very easy mode to bring in a wide skill range of players into, because it has bounds, right? It's going to be fairly short, and you're just doing the best you can with random choices, right? Like you don't have to worry too much about optimizing whatever. You just pick what's fun and go, right? Like just get going.
Yeah. Kyle, I loved you had a question on Thrall last night on like how to build him an ARAM, and I don't think we've ever gotten a response during a game with listeners that was like this is a fact that's carved in stone and just came back at 100 miles an hour.
Crash lightning.
Crash lightning, and then every quest counts, so you get as many dings as possible throughout the match. That's how you play ARAM on every hero. Trust me.
They had Narthus, so I skipped on the business there. But I got that level 20 Sundering business. That was really good. I had fun time with that. Lucio, though, I don't play Lucio. I got him ARAM last night. Didn't learn a thing. I think I healed great, but I did not learn how to be an annoying little gnat.
Yeah, ARAM skills definitely won't transfer 1-to-1 to the rest of the game. That is for sure.
But following that thread for a moment, there's a lot of people who are really curious about ARAM, and there's a lot of exclusive ARAM only players. And when balance happens, they look at the game through that viewpoint. I mean, if that is kind of your favorite mode, or one that you feel like is getting a lot of new players into the game, is that influencing balance overall?
Absolutely not. Like we will look at crazy 20s, or particular Lava Wave we've banned out, and now with Rainer's level 20 talent we've banned out, to like if there's something like incredibly toxic, we'll just ban it out. But ARAM is not the balanced experience, and I think that's a lot of the joy and what the magic of ARAM is, that you're not looking for a balanced experience. You're looking for random heroes just throwing abilities at each other, trying the best you can. You're not looking for this finely crafted drafting, co-drafting. Like it's just supposed to be fun. And sure, there's players that will absolutely, they build up a meta, they build up specific talents, and they'll keep having fun. But those aren't the players we have in mind when we're releasing a balance patch.
That's rad. And the final personal question we picked up was, folks were kind of curious about, if you still into your competitive Heroes of the Storm. Prodam wanted to know if you watch CCL or other tournaments, and if you're like a fan, do you have favorite teams? Do you have favorite players?
Absolutely. I have been running with 2 monitors for years, and it's pretty rare for me not to have some kind of Twitch stream up on the other monitor. And on the weekends, it's almost always going to be a Heroes tournament going on. For teams, I guess I would say I have less favorites now because it's more of like I just have particular players. So like one in particular, like Cattle will always be my favorite player. I coached him when he was on Complexity, and like we've been friends since. So it's really hard for me not to root for him. But other than that, I throw up on the other monitor all the time.
That's great.
Is anyone going to read? Everyone's going to read into this afterwards. It's going to be like, all right, what heroes does Cattle play? And are those heroes getting buffs?
I mean, to be fair, he plays phenomenally, and anything he's on is going to look broken, even though it's been a rough go at home for some of those, like Diablo. Oh my goodness.
You're right. Absolutely. Yeah, he is. I've known Kettle a very long time, and he's one of my favorite tank players to watch. He's so much better than me when it comes to tank. It's incredible.
You respect talent. That's good to hear.
Of course.
All right, let's get into kind of talking about your job and balancing the game and kind of where your head is at in terms of like your balance philosophy. We got a question in from Unpronounceable who said, "Is there something you'd like players to do that makes your job easier, either individually, collectively, or out of game?"
So I think when it comes to like out of game, when it comes to like feedback, the more context you can give me, the better. Like what hero you're playing, what game mode, if it's ranked, what skill level you're at, draft, all that kind of stuff really helps paint a better picture of what moment you're describing when you're sending me feedback, right? Like if, example, like Vala's W build when we first released that rework was a little strong, right? And there's a lot of feedback about it. It was a lot harder to get at like when exactly is this really problematic, right? What is the exact point that we should nerf it? Because we can nerf it in a lot of different ways, right? We can nerf different talents, different synergies. We can nerf, we decided on scaling just because of that late game power. But the more context you can give me when providing feedback, it just gives me more tools to attack problems.
That's a really interesting example because that one you dealt with in a sort of new way. You augmented the quest so it had a little power spike jump exactly where it was and then tailed off from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like how I reached that conclusion was I'm playing on live my own, but I went through a lot of Twitch clips and watched Valas at level 10 team fights, and they really weren't, wildly out of control at that level 10 fight with the higher scaling. And I didn't really want to break that. I still want that W build to feel worthwhile. And that's kind of how I came to the conclusion is that early game Vala wasn't crazy. Hey, late game Vala, level 16, level 17, level 18. Yeah, maybe that multi-shot doing 1,000 damage is too high, right? Like, I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. It was unique. And again, it was, I guess that was part of the same patch where I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting one so quickly. So it felt like that was dealt with faster than I expected. But that's good to know. It's funny because like when we ask for like emails and stuff on the show, we're like shorter ones we tend to prefer. So it sounds like you're like no, leave no stone left unturned. Give me all the specifics. I want them.
Yeah, the context of the moment of what's driving the feedback is super important. Like how bad it feels. You don't have to give me 3 essays about why it's bad, right? You can just tell me that you don't like it, and then the situation to me is like super critical.
That gives you something actionable, right? You can kind of
absolutely
assess different factors. Well, that's cool. We got a question from Duality who said, have balance philosophies changed at all since Jackson left the team? Adam, as we previously referenced. In general, what are some lessons that Jackson left you with and some of his ideas that you are trying to preserve? And what is something new or different that you can now do that was maybe not a goal or a priority before? It's a thick one.
That is definitely a thick one. And give me a moment here to. So I think I'll start with kind of like the core Adam philosophy that he left me, and that I was mentoring off of for quite some time. Is kind of like the pillars of balance in Heroes is focused on things that are fun, things are fair, and things are diverse, right? And there's a assumption that balance is kind of one-to-one with fairness, but that doesn't lead to a great game, right? That doesn't lead to something that you want to launch and play and have a good time with, right? Like rock, paper, scissors is, quite fair, but it's not exactly diverse or fun, right? And so those are the main pillars I look to when I'm deciding the overarching health of the game is those 3 things. I'd say one thing that I'm doing probably more deliberately than Adam. Adam did a very good job at this. This is just something I make sure I try to do in every patch is I look at what high level players are banning. And those first 4 bans from high level players are something they have decided that just straight up don't want to play against. And so either that's nerfing them or bringing other things up to that level is something I'm trying to do in every patch. It's not always successful, but it's definitely a goal I'm trying to do with every patch. That was the motivation behind the Lost Vikings nerf, the motivations behind the Chromie nerf, and stuff like that. It's just basically every patch trying to make sure there's at least one thing that touches those really high level plays banned heroes.
That's a cool way to put it. I like that example. Like, it's really digestible, at least like for me, as like a kind of a mortal player of the game. I would put it. Like, I'm a normal person who likes this game. Yeah. I'm not amazing at it. But like hearing that stuff like consistent bans at top echelon of play is can be a red flag. That's something Absolutely. I can digest. Cool. Got another question here from Bacon. I'm just going to say Bacon IT. That's how I'm going to choose to pronounce this one. It's like the idea of IT Bacon. Are the devs willing or able to share anything about some of their philosophies guiding reworks for heroes?
So as the kind of live and balance guy, this isn't necessarily my forte, but I can say generally, hold on, let me figure out how I want to approach this. Yeah, so there's a couple ways we can approach reworking. The most common one you'll see is something we just call a talent shuffle. And the idea is that there is a dominant build and there's talents that have existed for a while and they haven't really sparked any interest. And so when we see a rework for a talent shuffle, it's basically like, let's add some spice. That's really the main priority of this rework, is let's add some spice to these talents to make them more exciting. Like the Vala rework, we would consider kind of in that talent shuffle category, where Vala was great, she was fine, people were enjoying her, she has different builds, decent-ish pick rate across them, decent diversity, but we really wanted to add more spice into those talents to make them more exciting.
I think you succeeded. Like, it's a personal anecdote for me, but it had been a while since I had picked up Vala. And so I was very, very excited. It wasn't simply just because the W build was quite strong at the beginning. Although, God, Kyle and I kind of playing together and discovering that in real time, because that was the first time in a while. Kyle, you and I had a good chunk of time to play together, like right when the patch went live.
We do look at win rates. We tend to what was the Lily Falstad. We grab probably those exact ban ones that you're talking about for sure. But going off of that, and you mentioned the shuffle, someone like Blaze, that was a shock, but didn't necessarily break the hero. However, something like Suppressive Fire moving up gave him this whole new role as an offlane joiner and combatter.
Yeah, that's actually something I've learned quite a bit from Daybringer, who is my manager, actually. And he is really big on not necessarily viewing like talent tiers as this like sacred thing that need to be like, this has been here forever, it needs to be this way. He's like, let's just move it, right? And that is kind of me following in his footsteps of just, hey, I think Blaze has never really been super successful as main tank. He's had some success here and there. And part of that reason might just be because, hey, his tank talents are too late. Let's just try moving him, right? And so that I wouldn't necessarily call what Blaze happened to Blaze as a rework. I would definitely say he was intended to become like content for the patch. I wanted him to shift things up when he came out.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. In that way, like a rework is this huge kind of overarching, almost sounds like a let's see what happens. We're going to make this fun. But when something happens like an Anduin going, Lightwell to level 1 that people are just really going to dig and enjoy, how do you picture that? Are you like a dungeon master sitting on a notepad being like, okay, and then you draw a little arrow and you have a little stick figure Anduin that then puts out a Lightwell? Like, what's the vision process to even begin imagining that impact?
So a lot when it comes to our reworks and whatnot, this is why we'll separate something like Vala and something like Blaze, is that as soon as it's a rework, it means we've been working on it for a lot longer. So we've had the benefit of a lot of iteration and a lot of playtesting. Something like Blaze, we didn't have a ridiculous amount of iteration. We just wrote it down, sounded cool, tried it. All right, let's go, right? Where something like words like Vala or Anduin, it's just like, let's, we have the, master paper design, right? And we just have to try it. Like that's really the only way it works, is that you have to get in game, you have to playtest, you have to iterate. And that's how you get what you get.
So is a lot of it come down to like kind of how long it took? Like, not
Sure.
that I want to over quantify. Like, I don't think it's like black and white, what is considered a rework and what's considered just a balance update. But it sounds like that's a major factor.
Absolutely, a major factor is, and it changes how we approach it in terms of playtest. Like how hard are we going to playtest it? How frequently we're going to playtest it. Is it going to be the main focus of the playtests we're having? Like there's a lot of nitty gritty when it's the difference between a rework and just something we're doing for a balance update to make it spicy. But length of development is definitely like that's the easy one to point at.
Gotcha. It makes a lot of sense, especially with how many factors tend to get changed up when something gets the rework banner. So we have another question here from Jay Brunson, who asked, is there a certain era or patch in your history behind the curtain of Heroes of the Storm where, in your opinion, the game was as close to perfect balance as it could be? I'm interested in this one because I also am kind of curious what your definition of perfect balance would be.
I'll be honest, it's really hard to define eras on this side because the way things come out so quickly on our end. Like it's so weird to be working on something for a long time and then it's live, right? Like it's not as definitive as it was as a player. As a player, you're like playing the patch constantly, right? Whereas we're always looking ahead. But I'd say that I'd probably like close to around like 2 years ago, we had this really good time period where what was first pick was not as important, and we had a lot of really good tanks and healers in rotation at high level. I think I want to say around that era is like when we had a very healthy game, is when you have that like a wide range of tanks and healers that you can pick early without fear or concern. Like I think drafting was in a good spot.
So it would have been like 2019. Trying to
If
recall what the meta was.
Yeah, if you have to like bolt me, like I'm really trying to describe that experience of that era, and I don't actually know the exact timeline of when that was, right? But
well, that's cool. Well, I mean, it seems I'm like noticing a trend, and I'm sure, as with always, there's more to it. But the examples you pointed to, again, it comes back to like, oh, for me, that's digestible. It's like you seem to be focusing on anything that seems stale or like overly banned or like trends like that. And I think your answer here really plays to that. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think when it comes to things that are imbalanced or underpowered, it's definitely the duration that they stay in that state that drives frustration and people being, not as happy with the game, right? Like if we have something that's kind of overpowered, but it stays that way for like 2 weeks, people forget it just as quickly, right? But if you're dealing with this, you've been banning this hero first ban for months, it can, grind on your nerves and you feel like you're not really moving around much, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting. So what about the tenants, the commandments of gold and like their Kael'thas bans, or maybe the overarching like Moralis bans you've seen in the past?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's definitely what heroes that we would kind of like. This is not a great word to use, but they're kind of like gatekeepers of certain ranks. Like we expect you, if you want to rise above the rank at which Kael'thas is banned, you have to learn how to play against Kael'thas. That is something that we're just right now and for a long time we've been okay with. Like we just you need to learn how to play a little bit. You need to split from your allies a little bit when they're on fire, right? Like if you want to get raised in rank, and you don't have to, you can keep playing ranked, you can keep playing at your level and having a great time playing with your friends. You don't have to rise in rank. Really want to, gonna have to improve against Kael'thas.
That is, as someone who enjoys Dark Souls, that is an amazing answer. Get good. These are the barriers.
Like if you want to rise in rank, right? If you're looking to like you can still get better without rising in rank. You can have lots of fun. Like just particularly for I want my elo to go up, right? Well, play a little better.
I like this concept, yeah. and my follow up here is for fun, not because I want you to set anything in stone. But is there anyone else? Like, do you think there's a boss for gold, a boss for platinum, a boss for diamond, in the same way that Kael'thas is?
I would say there's not like we don't have a definitive list besides like Kael'thas and Lily. Those are the ones that or honestly like Nova is a hero that gets mentioned quite a bit, especially in QM. And I would say we don't have a definitive list, but when we're getting feedback, it's definitely a lens that we're using. Is to like, okay, where is this happening? Well, how heavy should our hand be when trying to help these players have a better game, depending on where they're at, right? Particularly for Storm League changes. When it comes to like Storm League is not the only lens at which we're balancing the game, right? We have a lot of players that play Heroes of the Storm, and Storm League is not the start and end of that conversation.
Gotcha. Well, now, Kyle, I want to draft one up. I think that's the next thing we need to work on Into the Nexus is coming up with ITN's final league boss list.
Yes. I wanted to do Stephen Colbert style list for a long time. Let's make it happen. We'll make them permanent. We'll put them up on the show, move them around as we need.
As long as Bears make the list. That's fine.
Of course.
Well, we've got another question here. This one comes in from Crushinator, who says, players have a lot of opinions on whether balance and bug fixes should be released piecemeal as it's ready, or whether they should be bundled up in larger patches and or content releases. Is there an ideal patch size and release schedule that you aim for, or are there too many variables in workflow to have those kind of goals? So this kind of gets into what you were just talking about, how on the inside, you're looking so far ahead that it's not always as easy to keep an eye on, like, I don't know, I guess the current state of things, but.
Sure. I guess I would say that there is very deliberate decision-making that I can't share.
That's fair. That's an honest answer. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, it's something we bring up a lot too. We're just like, sometimes, I don't know. Right now is like a bad example because you made a lot of, I think, really healthy changes really quickly. Like, I want to keep saying, oh yeah, well, it'd be nice if Raynor got a little damage back quicker, but Raynor got damage back very quickly in this most recent scenario.
Yeah, that was an easy change for me to make, right? Like I definitely think that there is just some situations where when your entire community is like, hey, can you just call it Gambit instead of Lone? It's really hard to be like, yeah, why not, right? Like it's so easy to just say yes, right?
Yeah, that's cool. I love that we had a discussion on the show about like, why does Lone seem out of
mechanical?
Yeah. It's like I'm gonna go apply for this talent, and the bank will tell me if I'm allowed to have it or not.
I think the entire time we were testing Lone, it was like Lone PH, right? Like this is a placeholder name. We need to come up with something, and then we're like, and then our community, correctly was like, you can do better. So we did, right? Like,
oh boy,
I'm sure we grab onto some pretty weird things. I remember the big, we got to rename the Banshee. There's got or the ability to pepper. There was a whole thing about
some
pepper.
Yeah. That was also Daybringer's banner pushing forward for that, and I respect him heavily for it. I think it's a much better spot with Give Him Some Pepper.
I'm noticing so many weird parallels between the type of content we create and the content that you all create. like our audience keeping us honest, like,
or another way we could say it is things we make you deal with. So thank you for being
that's a good way to put it.
We apologize.
No, absolutely. We love feedback.
Yeah.
This is a cool question. I've got my own guess for it, and I'll reveal that after the fact. JP Jurassic Park 3 asks, what is your least favorite thing about HOTS and why? How would you change it to improve this?
Wow. That is a hard question. Huh. Least favorite thing about HOTS. I think my least favorite thing about HOTS is that the act of playing it is not the best way of improving at it. I think there is a lot of nitty-gritty details that are really hard to pick up on why you're winning or losing games. There's a lot of things that I think in Heroes make it a smoother experience. Simple, like healing wells. Healing wells just make laning a less painful experience, right? If you go play another MOBA and they don't have healing wells and you're like getting out traded and you have to recall if you don't want to die and you're walking back to lane, like that's a painful experience and that teaches you things, right? Heroes smoothes those out, but it also makes it harder to learn. I don't have a great idea off the top of my head other than the experience globe change we just made at helping to further increase it to make it a little bit easier to learn the game as you play it so you can keep improving and having a good time.
That's a good answer. That's not what I would have guessed at all.
I didn't have anything in mind, but that definitely was not it. Like,
no, that's really solid. It's cool to hear the healing well thing in addition to the experience globes. How has that kind of been received from data and your all's end?
We're incredibly happy with it overall. There might be some changes we make to it in the future, but right now we're very happy with it. It's accomplished a lot of our goals. We have a lot of moments where people are like, oh my goodness, we missed that much experience. It's like 2 lanes of small globes down there and we missed it, right? Like, I think it's doing a very good job. Very happy with it.
Awesome.
I love the crossroads of like interface this, like just game design and also like user experience. And so I really, really geek out. Like when the XP Globe change originally came in, I was just kind of like, this is genius. Like we've been talking about how do you visualize XP? It's something we had talked about for years, and like I love if there's one armchair game designer chair that is the most worn in my home, it's the visual one. It's the UX one. Like I love thinking about that kind of stuff.
And I don't want to be rude, but like I think it's really easy to think of UI and design being like these very separate things. But like when you really think about how UI functions and how players react to it, it is just as important, if not more important, than like tool tips or anything else, right? Like that's really how you're going to teach players how to play your game, right? Like that's guides that behavior.
Yeah, because over the years, like Kyle and I talking about like things we'd love to do, like if we put them all together, you wouldn't be able to see the screen anymore of all the times we've gone, oh, it'd be so cool if we had a visual indicator for this.
Right, it'd be a WoW streamer UI. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, healer specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, and then you do so many visuals, you have to go into sound effects, run away, little girl.
Absolutely.
It snowballs hard. Well, now I want to reveal my guess because I was entirely wrong.
Go ahead.
I thought you had something against tank lane clear.
I'm not holding a grudge, but it's definitely something I've kept an eye on.
It really
my safe answer.
Yeah, but it actually is a really dynamic, and particularly for things like NGS, where it's not quite that extreme cusp of we're going to get every globe ever, and the hog wrangles aren't perfect for a double soak. It really has influenced the game dramatically because you can't do this like bizarre team and then just throw the big patch of Johanna on it and call it good.
Yeah, it's as players have really improved at playing Heroes of the Storm, like the existence of wave clear wasn't really a huge deal in the technical alpha of Heroes of the Storm, right? Like there was heroes that could do it. We had the Janas and the Kilthas and all that jazz, but that importance on it has been something that's been rising as players get better and better at the game. And making sure that there's a cost to it, and this isn't just like, oh, you pick this one talent and now it's trivial for the whole game, right? It's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. I want it to be a source of struggle. Like I don't want it to be a chore, but I want it to be something that is fought and earned.
We got a number of questions kind of in that XP range, and now we're kind of heading into that more balance-heavy discussion. The off lane often comes up for people, and they want to know how it's going to be more interesting as the double soak influence a purposeful one to make that off lane a dynamic play, or is there something you all have in mind in the future?
I can't share future changes, but it's something like the offline is always going to be something that is we have an eye on. Like it is a very fragile place. I'd say it's very easy for the offline to get to a point where you just don't want to be the one who has to do it. And so we're definitely keeping an eye on it, trying to keep it fun, make sure you can still get wins, right? You still want to have a game that you can, turn back and look at and be like, you know what? I helped my team immensely that game. I played out of my mind. Like I want offlaners to be able to say that.
I do enjoy that feeling. So I'm glad we're trying to preserve that. That's rad. Kind of along those lines, we had a question from Schizo who wanted to know how is a balanced team accounting for heroes that fall into multiple roles, such as Tank Stukov, and is this role flexibility something that is being aimed for? This makes me think of off laning as well, because like right now my thing is, boy, I want to pick Blaze, and people just go, cool, he's got the off lane, but instead they all go, oh, cool, he's gonna tank for us. I'm like, no, I want to go lane.
I mean, so when it comes to like team drafting, you're definitely going to communicate with your team with some of these, heroes that are filling these multiple roles. But as far as our balancing it, we don't. If the community suddenly starts trying to do something like Tank Uther and now more recently Tank Stukov, we're not trying to immediately sever that. Like if it's something that we don't think is just straight up not fun to either play or play against, maybe we'll be more heavy-handed. But generally, we'll like be aware of it and try not to like break the flower quite yet, right? Like give it some air to breathe, see how it plays out, see how the community responds to it. Like we're not going to rush to change things that are cropping out in multiple ways.
Gotcha.
So I guess a shorter version of that is we keep an eye on it, but we don't rush to change anything. We just let the community figure things out.
Go for it.
I was going to say, I like that approach because like the discovery portion of it is to me part of the fun, and it's part of kind of like the, I don't know, like the constant, breadth of the community is like kind of finding these things out and sharing that information. Or in the case of really powerful bugs, not sharing that information and just talking about it openly without explaining how it works and making it very hard to report on.
I would say you're definitely not alone in the discovery being a large part of the fun, and that's part of why I make that focus on these spicy talents that sound really cool. And maybe if what if we stim drone this auto attack support hero, right? Like this kind of like crazy ideas that probably won't work, but it's worth trying, and you'll have fun doing it, right? Like I definitely, that is a player profile that I want to support as much as I can.
We're into balance now. The chat's already going a little crazy for this one too. What are your thoughts on balancing the game for different levels of play? And probably the most popular one that comes up, Genji.
Sure. Yeah. We want every hero to have a place somewhere. Every hero does not need to be playable and great at every skill level in every game mode. We right now are okay with Genji being this very, very high level players excelling with them and having a good time. We're okay if that's where Genji lives. Like there is a utopia where we are able to make every hero accessible and fun and interactive at all levels. But with 90 heroes and wanting to support a very diverse range of heroes that function a lot of different ways, the way we'd have to do that is we have to rein these heroes' unique elements in to make them more within our bounds. And so we like having our weird heroes that are outside of those competitive acceptable bounds at all level. But it does mean that some of these heroes aren't going to be top win rate heroes, in silver or in platinum.
Gotcha. Redditor by the name of What Up I think What Up kind of asked a similar question to that, but had a follow up that brought up CCL and asked if you watch CCL. We've already established you do, but wanted to know, does CCL, or we'll just make this tournament wide too, any other tournaments directly influence balance changes, or is it more that just these community tournaments that these players playing at the top of their ability influence the overall meta, which then helps dictate balance changes?
Okay, that's an interesting thought. I would say CCL and other tournaments like it help inform things to keep an eye on. It's very rare that we'll see something out in the wild and immediately be like, okay, that's a problem, let's fix, right? It's generally like it's more of a process than just seeing a draft and be like, oh man, Wildheart, dude, double support every game, better, nerf all supports by 5%, right? Like it's not really like that. It's like, okay, hey, we're seeing them have some success here, so losing out here or there. Let's keep an eye on double support to make sure that it's, if that's something we don't want to happen, we're not encouraging it, right? Like it informs future decision making. It's not the root cause.
Gotcha. Okay, so like many things, there's a couple different factors to it. It's
absolutely
kind of multi-layered.
And and also there's a lot of things in CCL that just won't make it to Storm League, right? There's a lot of those players are just so darn good on heroes like Medivh or Hosty Zul'jin or whatever, and you're not going to see that come out into your Storm League games because you're not going to have that level of coordination that is required to pull off some of those heroes.
You just like whisper them and just like, hey, could you just cool it in like normal games with normal people?
I love seeing heroes like that in CCL. Like I love that CCL is able to produce this, like what happens at high level players with coordinated play. I think it's very cool. I think they're doing a great job over there.
It's interesting too because there's often a personality, a pet project of many of these teams. So you go buffing Stukov, and the team that's crazy about Tank Stukov is like, this is how you get the meta that we're looking for. This is insane. Everyone do it, and no one's comfortable at our home games.
Yeah.
Well, changing gears a little bit towards the bacon side. Delon asks, what is your criteria for baking in a talent for a hero?
So this is where it's actually a little more simpler than it would seem. A huge motivation is fun. Like Crossfire is just fun. It's like we go back to the design, the UI design and the sound design. Crossfire sounds good. It feels good to press it, right? And to achieve that. Baking in Crossfire was one of the easier decisions I've made. And then just the other decisions after that were in response to this thing I knew I wanted to do. So really, like if it's super fun and people are really picking it, it's going to be based. It's a very good candidate for being baked in.
So someone like Garrett, who got into the fray, but
Absolutely.
That wasn't a full rework. Was that one of those, we love it, let's do it and see what happens? Or was that a thought out boardroom meeting sort of business.
I'd say it was definitely more of a let's try it. That was not like a long play tested thing. It's just like we know Garrett's players at high level have been picking into the for a very long time. Are we really afraid that these other level 7 talents that we're giving him are going to push him into unacceptable bounds, especially when he's not already in the meta? Like he's always been, a pickable hero, but he's not in those like top 2, top 3 tanks that are in consideration. I wasn't worried of him suddenly blowing out the gates with, spell power reduction or attack speed reduction, right? Like I don't think that wasn't going to break anything. So I was more than happy to just shoot it out, give it to him, give him Loktar Ogar, see what happened.
Gotcha. Well, before we move it into kind of more gameplay focused things, before we get kind of out of balance, and we've talked a couple times about kind of how often these changes come, I do want to ask, and I don't think I'm expecting an answer, but like, do you think we're going to notice a trend in how frequently updates come out this year? Because it's something like that, obviously, for the purposes of this show, like we're very cognizant of. We're like last year, it seemed like it was basically every 4 weeks there was an update.
Mm-hmm.
And this year we were like, okay, it's looking like it's about every 6 weeks. And then just like out of nowhere, we got like 2 updates very quickly back to back. Can we just expect more of that? Just kind of an update when it's ready and when it feels like we need it? Or do you think we're going to still have something that like a trend will emerge in terms of how
I would imagine a trend will emerge. Like it would surprise me if people who recognize patterns are going to recognize patterns, right? But we are always going to wait until something is ready. That's why we're generally pretty, closed lips when it comes to exact dates, is because if something comes up, we don't want to disappoint people. We'd rather just take the extra week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long the delay ends up being, because we want to get it done right. So that motivation is always going to be higher than our motivation of sticking to a regimented schedule. That said, the goal is generally to have kind of a regular cadence of balance patches. Yeah.
Awesome. That's good to hear. I've been really stoked on the updates we've gotten this year so far. So, but yeah, there were a couple episodes you go back and listen to. Kyle and I are just like sitting here with like yarn and making diagrams. Like it's been like 3 weeks, then it was 6 weeks, and now it's 2. What's going on here? Like just haven't figured it out yet. But
keep guessing.
Okay, we'll do. All right, we're getting into some gameplay focused questions. Baka, I'm just going to go with Baka says, some people have argued something along the lines of mercenary camps usually being taken more for their experience than their pushing potential. Are there any changes or an anomaly, there's a word I haven't heard in a while, for mercenary camps in the works?
I will say that I definitely hear the desire to want to push alongside your mercenaries rather than just take them at a certain mark before an objective spawns. I hear that. We don't have anything in the works, but I'm hearing that feedback.
Okay, rad. I want to live in that world.
I think it's a very natural ask, right? It makes sense to want to push alongside the spell or a knight. Like it makes sense to want to do that, right? There's a lot of different things we'd have to do to make that work, and there's a lot of sacrifices we'd have to make it work. It's like the reality is we do like team fights. We do like people going to objectives and team fighting. Like we don't, that is going to be a higher priority than something as making sure the Savant is split pushing and bot lane is doing more damage, right? Like that's just the reality of it. Is we want team fights to be cool and fun and the right thing to do.
It's such a fundamental core of Heroes of the Storm, though. I mean, one of the big advertising when Alpha came out for me was, guys, did you know the jungle does things for people who aren't just in the jungle? Like, come on over.
Yeah. I definitely don't think mercenaries are in a point where they're not worth taking, right? They're already on these kind of regimented, like, making sure you have a composition that can take mercenaries is already an important thing. So it would be I would not expect just a straight buff make mercenaries stronger in any way. It'd probably be some kind of lateral move if we really, really want to do something. I hear the feedback. We don't have any plans. It's not something I'm actively looking to change.
Makes sense. Now, what about on, let's talk some forts and keeps, because the Jedi Council asked, have you thought about reversing the forts and keeps prioritizing heroes who attack other heroes over shooting minions? Sure. I'm pretty used to it at this point, but still do feel like I miss the old style.
So that was something there was pretty heavily consideration around it based on community reception and PTRs and all the stuff. There was a lot of discussion back when it was new. Now that it's been live for a minute, people have adjusted to it. We're happy with what it's doing the vast majority of the time. Maybe there'll be slight changes to how the rules work with certain objectives or something like that, but I wouldn't imagine it changing in any real, like, massive form.
Gotcha. I like the layered ads.
Absolutely. I think it makes sense for your forts to defend you. I think it just leads to a better experience.
Dwelly asks, when removing the medallion, the devs commented that the CC protection might be explored more in future patches. Is there something CC related being tested now?
I will say that the, dev response at the time was we might, and the answer is still we might.
It's a very, I can't call that a tease. I will not give that.
It is not a tease. We might or we might not. We don't know.
But it's very exciting because you guys, we ended anomalies as this functional sort of seasonal thing, and then we still got the XP change most recently. So
Absolutely.
we're all still exploring these ideas quite a bit. And in that vein, Corny asks, are you happy with fountains? Some are still calling for immunity until the forts and keeps die.
I am not super. When I'm playing Here's the Storm, I don't love it when someone snipes my well. I don't love it. It's not great fun. There is definitely some level of skill when it comes to sniping wells, but I don't know if it's worth the pain that it causes and just how worse the game feels to play when your well gets sniped very early in the game. Feedback is heard. No plans to share.
I'm with Corny on this one, Kyle. I get very tilted. Fishy.
That's a fair response, right? Healing wells just make the lane experience you're used to having the healing well available as you lane, right? Your lane matchups, you understand what role that plays in that cooldown. Like it's a very ingrained behavior, and to have 1 game out of 10 or 1 game out of 7 or whatever, to have that well sniped very in the game, whether it's like an Eric sniping it or a Genji or whatever, it throws you off your rhythm in a very unfun way.
That's a good point, bringing up kind of the infrequency, because it's anecdotal, but my experience, it's infrequent. But do I remember when it happens?
Absolutely.
Well, and all those players who do it, let me introduce you to this idea of chunking. Oh, chunking's great. You chunk them, they go well, you throw a party in your head. You never had to go back there and do that thing. Just celebrate the chunk.
But yeah, as you saw with our change to move a lot of their health to shields to try to prevent that behavior a little bit, that'll definitely be a problem that we've identified in the past and are keeping an eye on.
Gotcha. Now, Fishy Penguin asked if you could share a more recent ranked player distribution, adding the last official one we got was mentioned back in summer of 2019, and they are curious what, if anything, has changed since then.
Nothing to share.
Okay. Be a little hard to do on a primarily audio podcast, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's move into talents then. I'm going to throw to you, Kyle.
So the B asks, are you happy with how lone talents are working out? Are there more thoughts on iterations for them?
I would say overall we are pleased with Gambit talents. Whenever we introduce something new and it's working pretty well, we generally try to explore more in that space.
How hard were they to do?
Do you mean like implementation or design or iteration? Like what's the crux of this question?
I want to know arguments amongst the team. Like how much were there people on the team going, no, this is madness, you can't do it. This is somewhat a bit, but I actually am curious if there was consensus.
I would say there was less panic than you might expect. Like it was a pretty well received, like, hey, I see where you're going. Like having clear goals when you're approaching a design really helps anchor a lot of that gut reaction of panic, right? And we had some very clear goals when approaching loans that I think were handled. I'm sorry, Gambit talents, my goodness. That helped us, inform our feedback and our iteration. There was definitely some wild moments because when we first tried them, they were incredibly strong.
I could see that. I could see where if they were tuned a little bit more, be a little
absolutely.
Potent.
But I think early on we had some moments in playtest that really informed the decision that we were going to keep them. Is that I think Johanna's Divine Fortress, I believe, was one of the earlier ones, and I was the one playing Johanna and just having 4 people chase me halfway across the jungle just to get that 1 stack of Gambit. I think we saw this in some, I want to say, some CCL scrims. When they first came out, like people, calling themselves the interest takers or whatever, as they were, blind bloodlust to try to take those Gambit talents. Like, we love that. We think that's fun. Like, So it was a very easy sell early on for us to want to make it work.
That's cool to know. It's just kind of, it was easy to kind of wrap heads around.
Yeah.
Now, Dolity had a question, and we'll put it in talent because they mentioned talents, but this could really go for kind of all of Heroes. They want to know, do you have an extreme or even what you would categorize as unrealistic dream for Heroes? Maybe a crazy talent you want to see added or something beyond that?
I think it's pretty rare for me to have a crazy talent that I'm not playtesting and iterating on, and I'd rather have its first visibility to the community be once it's in game. Like I like that patch note reviewer looking at the talent and being like, oh, wait a minute, like all these other, like all the numbers are moving, I don't care, but that's crazy. Like I like that moment, and so absolutely, I have some crazy ideas. You'll see them in future patch notes.
Awesome. we have people in the chat, including someone who looks familiar from HOTS, yelling Broodlust.
Yeah, Adam has messaged me more than once today about Broodlust. No promises. Adam, get out of chat. Don't you have a job to do?
Yeah, Adam, I want to play Diablo 4. Go. Yeah, I will also add Broodlust to that, please. Yes. Please and thank you.
See, now I have this, impossible task of living up to Broodlust for the rest of my career. Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. Props.
More Blizzard folk in the chat room, please. It's hilarious. All right. Spazzo wants to know, does the team have an internal reference sheet or anything like this when it comes to designing and implementing talents or abilities? Something along the lines of the example Spazzo gives is when implementing a knockback ability, use X formula, or when wanting a multiplicative damage buff with Y other buff types, use Z method. Is there anything like that?
We absolutely have documentation on best practices. But more often than not, when I'm personally implementing things, I'll just look at a similar functionality. Heroes has been around for many years, and it's pretty rare that I'm trying to do something that's never been done in Heroes before in terms of something that's a little bit aligned in terms of implementation. So more often than not, I'll use the live game as my reference for learning how things should be hooked up or implemented.
Okay, cool. Well, that's cool that there's documentation. When I read this, I was like, this is so specific, but also I was like, I wouldn't be
His
surprised.
specific example may not exist for that particular incident, but there's absolutely like, hey, you're implementing a slow, you should parent it this way, so that way it's removed by unstoppable, right? Like we absolutely have, best practices.
Gotcha.
Kai, how does that work when you get into 20s? Because that's such a unique sphere. The game needs to end. Something dramatic is happening. Like just today, for the very first time, I took Light of Stormwind. And I didn't get interrupted, and it was incredible, and it changed the whole game. When you reach that level of outrageousness, game must end. Where's the boundaries? How do you even know you can stack up these Orphea talents against each other?
So I'll give two different angles to that question. One is the easy answer, and the simple answer is the playtest and duration. We just try it, right? Like it's really easy to make sure something will not break the game if you just play it and make sure it doesn't break the game, right? But then something more like Orphea is that we've seen, if you really try to analyze that power of the very dominant talent on that tier before this change, was that 60% spell power talent. And you really start thinking, okay, will this really compete with 60% spell power? It's a lot easier to wrap your mind around it when you have that wealth of live data for how players are picking talents and how players are doing with those talents. Like it's not as hard as you think when you have all the numbers in front of you, as well as your own personal experience of playing it in game.
It's good to know. I'm always interested in internal numbers and stuff like that. Well, now comes the time where we're going to rapid fire shout rework requests at you from Reddit and see what your response is. Kale sauce come up a few times today.
I like them. What's the question? I'm sorry. Rework questions. Maybe.
Yeah, these are rework requests.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
No, that's all right. I'll just give you the list here. The popular ones and some of these Probius have been yelled in the chat room multiple times today too. So KT was definitely a common request in this thread, as was Nova Zagara Probius, Nazebo Probius, Butcher Arthas Whitemane, And those were the really popular ones that we just got a lot of people being like, rework, please.
I hear that loud and clear. And if a rework for any of those heroes is approaching release, I will probably push for us to leak some details. But as of this exact moment, nothing to share. But, who knows? We definitely, community demands are definitely or requests, is definitely something we look to a lot for when we're deciding whether to, buff something in a patch or do a rework or do a massive rework, right? That is we look at our Tastar rework, dragging them into that range assassin role. That wasn't something that, as designers, people were sitting around and be like, this is really eating at me day in and day and night. It's really something that the community has just been persistent about wanting.
So this is a bit off the cuff follow up, but when you talk about say there was a rework for any of these, you said, I'll push for leaking some info. Is that when you would get on the Reddit and kind of tease out?
Absolutely. Week before, we'll tease it, get that interest in the PTR, get some interest in that upcoming patch, something along those lines.
Cool. Whatever I need to do to really drive home that I loved that you did that for the last patch. Yeah, just well, that's good to know. And I'm assuming that's the kind of thing too, where it's before that comics gets made, some folks have to get asked, is it okay if we do this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not this cowboy riding in, under the noon sun and just shooting leaks from my hip, right? I'm asking people and making sure everyone's on board.
All right, Kyle, we're getting to the end here, man. We want to do these. Some of these are silly rapid fire questions.
Yes, of course. And we got one from Not Belial. You may have heard of him. Tell us a lie about something we're not supposed to know.
Ooh, a lie about something you're not supposed to know. Not Belial is the next hero.
There we go.
Level 100 Gularak asks, will Johanna get scaling on her E-Shield Glare?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's Shield Glare.
Enjoy your extra 40 damage at 20. You'll get it. I'm sorry for withholding from you and all the the pain that's caused you. Absolutely, we're gonna fix it right up.
Listen, how could you? You gave us 2 stacks. I'm going for DPS Johanna here.
80 damage. My apologies. That Johanna win rate is going to rise 5%, but it has to be done. Absolutely. No, in all honesty, bugs happen. We don't like when bugs happen. We aim to fix bugs.
Is there a way for the community to help out in a better way to perform that service that they want of sharing those bugs in a functional environment that works for
I believe Spazzo had an earlier question, and he has an incredible Google sheet that he has been slowly building up of all the reported issues he's seen. I could not ask for more than that. That is already too much work for a community member to be putting in. It is mind-boggling the amount of effort and passion that has been putting into bug reporting. It would be too much for me to ask more than that. I just want to offer my thanks, and it really does help us make the game a less buggy place.
Very cool.
That has got to be one of the biggest common denominators between every developer interview I've ever conducted or any developer I've talked to more than once is just their passion for, if you see something weird, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to much earlier in the show when you were saying give me all the details, really quantify what you're experiencing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, to completely jump off that train and back into these rapid fire kind of questions, Corny wants to know, can you add some kind of travel tunnel to Blackheart's Bay, similar to what you did with Warhead Junction?
We can.
There we go. That's the rapid fire.
Such a good answer. And then final quick question. Scorch wants to know, can Tyrande get a clearer and longer lasting Hunter's Mark visual?
Yeah. Something we'll look at. I will personally look into that. I can't promise any timetable or if it'll actually be something we do, but I think it's a reasonable ask.
Sick. That's not what I think of, but I wouldn't be mad if it was a little more obvious and a little bit more of a shout out to my team.
There might be some difficulties and it's not a number. It might not be just a number I can tune, right? It might be a little bit more complex than that. We might have to make it a team effort. But if it is something super simple, we can definitely investigate it.
As my brain goes, it's probably one of those things that's weirdly linked to something that seems completely unrelated.
Yeah. Game development has, likes to do that with you sometimes, like, oh, this should be easy. And then an hour later, you're like, oh God, I'm in deep.
The logos disappeared from the loading screen for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. But only in some languages and only if you installed on, certain graphics drivers. Yeah, who knows? I spent 4 years in QA on Here's the Storm. I'm well aware of how branching and weird things can quickly get.
Well, Josh, you've been so generous with your time and answering our questions. You're getting some emoji applause in the chat room, even. It's not the same. It's no BlizzCon, that's for sure.
No, not quite. But I'm more than happy to see it.
Yeah. So yeah, we're at the end of the show. So we want to thank you so much for coming on and kind of giving us a peek into your brain and into the whole process of developing Heroes of the Storm. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for getting outside of this show, whatever, that's about us. This is great for us, but thank you for constantly staying in contact with the community.
It's my honor, right? It's really cool to sit in this role that even I don't know. It's honestly what's been something I've been working towards in a dream for a long time. I'm more than happy to just be here and be a part of it, right? So thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yeah, of course.
Our pleasure.
Well, as always, we want to thank everyone at home listening, whether you're in the Twitch stream right now as I say these words, or you're downloading it after the fact. Thank you so much for tuning in into the Nexus. I'll tell you right now, if it wasn't for y'all listening, we wouldn't be able to get depths. It's like the fact that we have a community, you do a lot for us. So thank you for listening. Huge thanks to our patrons again. You want to support the show, check out patreon.com/ITN. We have all kinds of perks over there for you. And a huge thanks to our producers, Declan H, Cheesy Bob, Chris K, Sean B, and Mike R. If you want to catch us live, I promise it's fun. Chat room today is popping off. It's a good time. Check out twitch.tv/AMoveTV every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. You can also follow the show on Twitter at ITNcast. Sometimes we have time changes, and that's when you find out about it. But other than that, around the table, Josh, Cofolt, Rarjar, where can people find you? Either chatting to the Heroes community or maybe just tweeting.
So you can find my comments on Heroes in the Here's the Storm subreddit on Reddit. And you can see my balance changes on here'sthestorm.com, which you can also find the game, which is pretty fun. You should play it if you aren't already. If you're just a listener, download it, play it, have a good time.
Sick. Kyle, what about you, dude?
You can find everything I do over at kyleferguson.com, 2 S's in Fergusson. This week, I'd like to point out that I got to do another replay review with Azerite. Last time we did Chromie, and this time was a Hanzo. And I want everyone to watch this replay review from the CCL because I can't officially declare, but I'd like to say I made an effort in finally dispelling NA Arrow. We went into detail about why he was so far back. It does bonus stun and damage if you're farther back. It's kind of a big deal. Why those get shot at those angles. There's something called fishing. You may have seen this with Stitches. People do things in games for a chance to win, not always because the arrow is actually going to hit.
Awesome. Folks, if you want to follow me on social media, I'm Garrett Art on Twitter, and this podcast and every single other one that I produce can be found over at amove.tv. I might recommend you go check out the Angry Chicken Hearthstone podcast because there were some big announcements today that I'll be talking about next week. I had Josh to hang out with. What am I going to do? Push into the Nexus this week? No way. So go check that out. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again, Josh. Thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, good luck and have fun, everyone.
Take care.